Hi, Anna. Thank you for joining us and thank you for sharing your experience with sports psychology and especially as it relates to baseball.
Yeah,
Um, I'm just going to have a few questions here so that our coaches and players and anybody watching in this conference can get to know to learn a little bit more about you as a person and your relationship with sports and especially, what brought you to sports psychology.
yeah,
So we'll start with, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your relationship with sports in general?
yeah, absolutely. I am from Green Bay, Wisconsin. I grew up there pretty much my whole life. When I was younger, I played soccer, basketball, ran track and cross country. And then as I got a little bit older, I kind of specialized in soccer, and that became my main sport. I ended up going to St. Norbert College, playing soccer at the D3 level. And then yeah, ever since then, I coached soccer at a Division III school recently at Illinois Wesleyan University. So I really like to try and stay involved with sports as much as I can.
Nice. Yeah. And what are you doing right now? What are you doing? What are you up to right now?
Right now, so I just graduated from Illinois State. I got my master's in sports psychology, and I did a lot of mental performance training with athletes there. But as I was working with athletes, I started to see a couple other trends, like some anxiety or depression issues, which I wasn't necessarily trained in helping athletes deal with. So now I am getting a degree in mental health counseling at Marquette University so that I can be a licensed counselor. And then if those issues do arise when working with athletes, I'll be able to handle them directly and not have to refer them out to someone further.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's such an important point and thing to recognize.
Mhm.
What brought you specifically to sports psychology? You mentioned that you've been kind of always interested in sports, but why kind of add that psychological element?
Yeah, well, honestly, I didn't even know sports psychology was a thing until I was a senior getting ready to graduate with a psych undergrad degree. Yeah. And I was like, what do I want to do with this degree? And I started looking into it a little bit more and I came across sports psychology. And honestly, looking into it and looking at mental skills, I looked back on my own sport journey and how I could have been maybe a better player if I would have had someone to work on these skills with me, or I even knew that these skills existed. So I kind of took that and ran with it. And ever since then, I've loved it. And I think it's something that's definitely a growing field right now. And a lot of, um, especially in baseball teams are starting to hire mental performance coaches, and sports psychologists are showing up at college athletic departments. So definitely something that I'm glad I got involved in, and I want to keep expanding on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So then, to digress a little bit, do you have any advice for young players who are just getting introduced to baseball?
Yeah, I know that baseball is a really mental sport and it can be really easy to get into your head. I think at a young age, it's going to be really important to find people that you can lean on. I talked a little bit about this in my presentation, but um, there's always going to be something that doesn't go your way, whether you're not hitting that day or you miss a catch or something like that. And it can be really hard to deal with those things on your own and internalize it. So either whether that be a parent or a teammate that you can talk to and use as an outlet is going to be really important to have throughout life, even when it comes to outside of sports too.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I think those are some things that, I could have used that advice as well when I was a young athlete back in my day.
Definitely.
Um, Same question for new coaches. What advice do you have for coaches that might be just getting into the field of coaching or coaching baseball specifically?
I think just keep an eye on your players. Sometimes I think you can get really caught up in the performance aspect, the physical performance. As a coach, you think maybe, I mean, part of your job, most of your job is to make your athletes perform better physically. You want to help them get those home runs and stuff like that. But I mean, the other side of it is going to be mental health and well-being. And if an athlete is lacking in that, they're not going to be able to perform at their best. So constant check-ins with your players, even if it's just like a beginning of the season and an end of the season meeting. Those kind of things are going to be really important to help athletes feel seen and maybe feel like they can talk about things if they do come up.
Yeah, I completely agree. What do you feel is maybe one of the most valuable skills for a baseball player and then a coach as well? But maybe let's start with the player.
When it comes to mental performance, one of the biggest things that I've worked on with baseball players is using mental imagery, because like I said, baseball is a really mental game. So being able to take the time to, outside of practice, even to close your eyes and kind of picture some of the things that they want to do is really going to help with a lot of that anxiety that they feel. It's also going to help build confidence because they can see themselves doing a specific skill maybe that they've struggled with in the past. So then when they go out and do it in real life, it makes it a little bit easier for them. And then for coaches, I think a big thing is positive self-talk, because I think players can be really negative in their head, oh, I'm going to strike out, or I'm going to miss this catch or something. And if a coach is saying these things too, it can really pass over to the players. So remaining positive and keeping all the comments positive is going to be really important for the athletes.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Based on my experience, I always I realized that I always played better when a coach was positive and was believing in all the players. And similarly with mental imagery, I remember I was struggling at one point when I was younger with, I guess, holding things together when things would go wrong and not kind of spiraling. And that mental imagery was something that I think my mom told me about, that kind of helped me to start kind of make things click and figure out that, things can be done. It's a lot of the times it's shaped by how you're thinking, how your mentality going into it, like you said.
Yeah, and it's definitely something that takes practice and takes time to feel. It can feel really weird at first.
Absolutely.
So you got to stick with it.
Yeah. What again, to digress a little bit, what valuable skills or lessons do you think playing and or coaching baseball teaches people?
That's a really good question. I think one thing that is really important that we learn not only from baseball but from sports is being on a team, because you're always going to be collaborating and working with individuals, and especially in baseball, like it's a lot of individual work, like when you're out batting, but then also there's a lot of teamwork that's involved in it too. So being able to balance that and then also having a coach, I think, is a really valuable thing that sports and baseball can give to a player.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I know you mentioned Tom Brady, who, for those who may not be familiar, is like probably the best American football player to ever play the game. But do you have any other favorite player or coach or team, and why might that be?
Definitely Simone Biles. I think she is really resilient. She's been through a lot in her career. She's a gymnast, for those of you who don't know who she is. And recently has been a big advocate for mental health in athletes. And similarly to her, Michael Phelps, who's an Olympic swimmer. I think it's really important to normalize that not every athlete is going to have the strongest mind. And sometimes it takes someone like that to speak up for everyone else to be able to then speak out to get the help that is needed.
Yeah, absolutely. Not only did you just name probably two of the greatest American athletes of all time, but I think you're absolutely right in that their advocacy for mental health, and talking about that and acknowledging that people struggle despite, them being one of the greatest athletes of all time, people still struggle. So I think that that's such an important point.
Yes.
So getting a little bit deeper into that kind of psychology and mentality part of sports, I guess, why is it even important that we think about these things when players or coaches are dealing with sports? I guess so much of what we focus on, like you mentioned in your presentation, is physical abilities and muscle memory and skills and things like that. But why is it important that we think about mentality and headspaces and psychology with sports?
Yeah, kind of like going back to what you just said, the three of them can't really exist without one of them. And the one that's most often forgot about are those mental skills. And these mental skills are not only going to help athletes perform better physically, these can be carried on throughout life, whether it be in the workplace or in school. They're just good skills to have all around. But I think the biggest thing when it comes to being an athlete is you really can't perform physically at your best if you're also not there mentally at your best.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's, I think, so true in all aspects of life. You can't do anything to your best without being mentally all,
Mhm.
safe and feeling good.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, I guess this is just the last question here, and perhaps this will be more something that we will share with our coaches asynchronously and through the descriptions of this interview. But what resources are available for players and coaches interested in learning more about sports psychology?
There is an association for psychology. They have a website. It was on my slides, so we can get it
Yep.
from there.
Okay.
On that website, they have information about sports psychology, mental performance, mental health resources on there that has where you can find mental performance coaches by state, by country. And it just has good resources, articles about sports psychology, what's new in the news. It also has good resources for people looking to get involved in sports psychology, whether that be something that you want to do, where there's classes or webinars that you can sit in on. Also different schools that offer sports psychology PhD programs or master's programs. So I think that's probably the best place to go to find resources.
Okay, perfect. Great. Yeah, we'll share that. Like you mentioned, it's in the slides, and we'll put it in the description for this interview, and we'll post it on our website as well. But
Perfect.
thank you for coming. Thank you for talking to us about psychology as it relates to baseball, and for sharing your experience. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.